Hello, James. Very kind of you to invite me. I'm very delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners.
From what I see of you, like I say, you know, let's maybe talk about the MP thing first. I think that's probably instrumental in kind of, you know, maybe guiding some of the early part of the show. You have been elected as a member of Parliament twice, I believe, but one of the times you actually had come out in the media as an experience. Is that correct, Simon? Is that the full facts?
Yes, I was. I went public in, I think, about 2010, late 2010, early 2011, and then I was elected to office in 2012. So I'd gone public first, and then was elected. It came up, I think, about 6 times on the doorstep. It wasn't a big issue. And it worked out of the 6 people who questioned me, 4 were in favour and 2 were against. It put me in a very strong position because those members of the elite who would have a problem couldn't turn around and say that I'd been elected and then I'd told people about my experiences. Because I did it the right way around. Sure. People had a choice to decide whether they wanted me or not. And I was elected, and so it I think was a bit of an enigma for certain people.
Yeah, you know, enigma is probably the best way to explain it, because in one respect, you've had a strange situation with the media where you've actually gone from, well, let's say a media frenzy to some sort of an acceptance, somewhat, and partial acceptance anyway, I guess. I think, you know, there's been a shift in the media. Maybe we can talk about that. I know you were on the Morning Today show, and that was interesting, Simon. For the American viewers, by the way, it's a talk show in the UK on prime time television. But, I mean, are we seeing a shift in the media? Not just maybe you can speak about your case in the media, Simon, and then talk about maybe the overall case of subject matter.
Fine. Initially, when I went public, the established media attempted to do what they always do, which is a hatchet job, which is to try to make you look as if you're mad or a Walter Mitty type character. And I think they kept that up for about a year. The cracks began to appear in their attack because my story didn't change. And I know that they were looking for a change in the story or a change in the line I was giving. But what really swung it was simply that in around 2013, the Ministry of Defence in Great Britain, alongside with the American military, invited me for a 3-hour tour of an American military base in Great Britain. It's called the Filing Dales 3-phased space radar array. This is the only 3-phased array in the world. Even in America proper, they only have a 2-phased array. And this is a radar that's the cat playing the piano. The 3-phased array actually looks around 3/4 of the globe. And this was very difficult for the established media because here was somebody who was being given a guided tour around a top military base. And so the whole attitude of the established media changed after that.
Just to jump in there on that, what was the reason for the tour? What was the reason that they invited you?
Well, I live in the county of North Yorkshire, and this radar base is actually in the county that I live in. My daughter was approached. I have to be reasonably careful. My daughter was approached by somebody and was told that they knew what I was looking for, and my daughter was told that this particular individual could get me and my daughter into any secret base in Britain if I so chose. And my daughter spoke to me, and I just said, look, I get this sort of thing all the time. It's a joke, ignore it. But however, something like a year later, because that's how long it took, then the official approach came through, wanting all the details about me so that I could be checked. And I think that was another key for the established media, because it was well established by then that I declared that my mother had worked for MI5, and through that, the National Security Agency of America. My grandfather had worked for MI6, and through him, the CIA, and that I'd seen aliens, etc., and yet they still took me onto a military base. So immediately, the establishment, in terms of the media, realized that I can't be lying, because if you're a Walter Mitty character, then you are a threat. So why would you let somebody onto a space base, a space radar base, to be shown around? I had 3 hours of a tour. Why would you do that if someone was making stories up like that? You just wouldn't do it. So this was a game changer. And very, very quickly, I'll just tell you this because it did amuse me. We turned up at the gate, and obviously everyone's armed. We're not used to that in this country. I mean, I know the Americans are, but of course in Britain, our police don't carry guns, but here at the base, they do carry machine guns. And the guard on duty said to my daughter, "Identity, please." So she handed her passport, and he looked at the picture, looked at her, looked at the picture, looked at her, passed it back. And I went to give him my identity, and he just raised his hand and said, "That won't be necessary, sir." So they'd already knew waiting for me. And the other part that's interesting, I've spoken to other people who have been on a tour serving military or Air Force personnel. And apparently I got a slightly different tour. You get a presentation before you go in at the reception center, and there's a slideshow. And there was a special slide, I think, for me. Nobody else that I've spoken to said they got the slide. And basically what happens is they put a rocket on the picture, and they say, "We detect these." And then they put a picture of a satellite and said, "We detect these." And then they put a picture of the spacecraft, flying saucer, that Bob Lazar worked on in Area 51, which he called the sports model. And they said there was a group of us, and I'm included, "We don't see these." And then they showed a picture of the Starship Enterprise and said, "Ha, ha, 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 sometimes we see these." So what they were doing was saying to me in a very nice way, "Please don't ask any questions. Don't embarrass us. We're laying the ground rules down. We're going to take you around, show you, but please don't go into this topic." Now that was specifically for me, and I mean, I appreciate that, and I didn't make life difficult for them. So they were very well aware of who I was. You can't let someone onto a secret base that you haven't checked out everything about them. So this was the key point, that the established media either left me alone or became quite supportive.
So it seems like it was almost like there was a nod of respect there when, you know, your passport wasn't asked for, number one, but also it seems like what the media was trying to do was to create this polarization, right? You know, that here is this political individual that it has these, you know, extra dimensional type of experiences. You know, they're trying to create that polarization, and then all of a sudden, you know, you get this invite onto this base, and now instead of the polarization, we now have a connection. Now there's a bridge that's made, and now there's a level of being able to take this more as truth. I don't want to say more seriously, but more as truth. And I actually watched one of the video that James is talking about, the interview. I was watching the people's faces as you were speaking with them, and you could actually see that there was more of a level of acceptability, more of a less armored look that they had, that, you know, people have a tendency to have when they're interviewing about this subject, right? Especially if they don't know much about it. So it seems like there was definitely an impact and an effect as you were getting these other interviews afterwards.
Susan, I think you've hit the nail on the head. What was interesting about that particular interview was I was asked to do 2 drawings, one of what we would say in Britain as a mantid, but Americans would pronounce as a mantis, and a reptilian, a Draconis reptilian. And what they wanted was to do the backdrop shot and have my 2 drawings. And the continuity girl took my drawings and then came back 5 minutes later and said, "We're not allowed to put this one up." And they did not show the reptilian drawing. So they put the mantis up, And when I asked, why can't you show this one? She just said, I don't know. We've just been told we're not allowed to put it up. So when David Icke wrote his book, The Greatest Secret, and one of the chapters was Don't Mention the Reptilians, I really smiled, because it is the case that there are certain organizations that are very, very cagey about anything to do with a reptile.
And what is it about seeing a drawing of a reptilian that they may be afraid of? I know we're speculating here. I'm just curious about what is that? Because I mean, we've seen pictures of what that is, and I guess on our own. But what do you think that might be?
I don't think it was about fear. What I think it was there was a concern that if the drawing was placed up, one of the interviewers might have drawn attention to it and asked a specific question about them. And I think they didn't want any debate around the reptilian agenda, who they are or what they are. Whereas the Mantis agenda, if that had come up, it wasn't so close to home.
Wow. I'm getting it then. It's okay to talk about certain denominations of extraterrestrials, but ones that they want to shy away from. Is that correct, Simon?
It's the agenda and the association. If you are familiar with an extra-dimensional being that is very independent in its dealings in terms of how it conducts itself, that's very different from something that makes an arrangement, or you sign a contract, or you sign an agreement with. Then you are in a contractual arrangement with that particular alien race. And that's where the problems occur. So there is a contractual agreement with the reptilian, or part of a reptilian faction, and that means that some people tread very carefully.
Wow. Tell me about your time as an MP. I know we talked about the media attention, but working as an MP, having come out public, tell me about the man, Simon Parkes. Tell me about you. How did you go about business? Was it any different for you, Simon? Did anything really affect you on a personal level?
No. When you're involved in politics, you should be in it. You should be in it because you care about people. Yeah. Sadly, that is not always the case. I was very fortunate because I was elected because I would make sure that the streetlights were working, that the rubbish bins, the trash was collected and done properly. So these were the issues that mattered to people. To be honest, I didn't care anything whether I saw flying saucers. The question was, have you broken the law? No, I haven't. Okay, there are plenty of people who have embezzled money, stolen taxes, and have lost their position as a politician. I hadn't done any of that. And also, oddly enough, because I'm quite articulate, the people felt that I could fight their corner. So if they were having an issue, let's say they have a planning application or something like this, they want someone to help to work it through. Well, they need someone who can hold a conversation, is not frightened of bureaucracy, is not scared of red tape, and doesn't buckle when the pressure goes on. So what they saw was a man who could do that, and that's why they voted for me. The fact that I saw flying saucers, to be truthful, didn't matter. That was the problem with the elite, because for them the issue was flying saucers, but for the public it was, how can this man make our lives better on a day-to-day basis? So it shows the huge disconnect between the people in the elite positions of power and the vast majority of decent, ordinary people. And this is what's happening. It's a grand canyon of distance between those on the ground and those who think they know what the people on the ground want. And I represented the people on the ground and always carried the support of the people on the ground. And because of that, it made it very hard for anybody to attack me.
What have you noticed in the area that you're leading in your? We call them towns here, right? Or counties. I'm not sure what you call them. Where you are.
Well, we've got cities the size of towns, but yes.
So, okay, well, that's what we call them here. What have you noticed? Is there a difference if you look at other towns that are nearby, or other counties that are nearby, versus the one that is in your immediate area that you're
You
responsible
mean
for?
demographics? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, demographics, but also the way that things are done
Jurisdiction.
in your community. Do you see? I mean, can you really look and see like a marked difference between how people are responding? Because I mean, here I'm sure in the United States, if somebody said that they had extraterrestrial encounters, and that was part of just who they were as they were running, of course, people here in the United States probably wouldn't be so accommodating to that, let's say, because it's something that's on their focal point. But it seems like that you're able to do something that is unique and different with the area of people that you're in your local community. So what are some of those things? What might those be?
Now, I think that the real answer to your question is that people in Britain are obviously more sick and tired of the official government than the Americans are. What's happening in Britain is that people are voting for individuals who are not coming out of the same mold, people who are fresh with new ideas, even people who seem a bit maverick or strange. In actual fact, that's what the electors want, because they are so distrustful of the usual type of message and usual type of person, that when someone is a bit different, far from running away from that person, they are actually then coming up. I mean, anybody who knows me knows that I can't walk out of the street without people coming up and shaking me by the hand. That's the reality. Now, this is what the people in the top positions don't see. But this is because for some reason, I've captured the hearts and minds of people. And I haven't gone with a story of fear or danger or, woe. I've gone with a story on a positive message. Yes, I first went public with the alien experiences because they were fundamental to me and some members of my family. But the whole point of this was to deliver the message of hope that the human race can actually evolve and develop, and that the methods of government that we have around us aren't actually very beneficial to people. So it's been a tightrope between being loyal to the country that I live in, but being distant so that I am not corrupted by the same sort of energies or ideals that are prevalent in every Western world.
Wow. I know you're not hippy-dippy about the whole ufology thing, Simon. I know you're very, very sane and very...
Thank you.
I know. I want to state that because it's true. You're just going into this thing like it's a new venture for you, or you're just telling your story for some fame. I mean, it's an important part of your life, and there's an experience there. And you have this other normal career as a politician, and you're very grounded. And I know from how you present the data, it's not done in a hippy-dippy way, as I say. I mean, tell us what you do think about it. I mean, tell me some stuff about, your perspective on ufology as you see it. Not as an experiencer, but as the reality. I mean, I'm talking from an ancient alien hypothesis to where we're at now. What is there an increase in activity? Things like that. I mean, are we in an unusual time right now? And tell us what the view of ufology according to Simon Parkes.
Well, there are so many questions there that I can't remember all of them. What I will say to you is I cannot divorce being an experiencer from giving you an overview, because I will always be part of my life, and the expression that I give you will be with that. One of the reasons I went public was I was fed up with the fact that the subject matter had not advanced since the 1950s. I'd spoken to a very respected person who puts on conferences, symposiums, and he said to me, we like the idea of the flying saucer landing and the little grey men coming out and victim lying in the bed with sleep paralysis and then the alien doing stuff and going away, because that sells tickets. Now, that was the case in the 60s, and it's still to a large extent the case now. We have not moved on. First of all, I don't see humans as victims. I reject that totally. Doesn't mean that people aren't harmed and people aren't hurt. That's not what I'm saying. But I do object to people making money because they are aiming at a certain type of genre or a certain type of message, which doesn't actually address the main issues and doesn't push the matter forward. So one of the reasons I went public was to challenge not the people who have these experiences, but those that market those experiences. So that's the first thing. You mentioned ancient aliens. This is fundamental to the understanding of the human race. And the model that we are now, the Homo sapiens, the model that was created 220 to 250,000 years ago. Humans have been on this planet a lot longer, and aliens did not create us. But what aliens did was alter and change us. So the model that's on the planet now is a direct response to genetic manipulation that occurred around that time. So we have to understand our history, and we have to understand our place in the history, so that we can then be confident to come forward and be proud and to be able to hold our head up high, regardless of who or what we are, because some people would look on us as mongrels, as a mix. Well, my argument is life, and life is beautiful, and who is anyone to tell anyone else that they are less inferior or more inferior than anyone else? So it was really about challenging some viewpoints. So I'm not happy with the way ufology is developing. It's in the hand of a small band of people who seem to want to push the same old agenda.
I would love to jump in here, because you are probably one of the only people that I've heard say something that I have believed has been true probably the vast majority of my life, which is the MLab is really a cold reproduction of natural contact experiences, or natural contact that humans have, that come into this plane of existence, knowing that there's a relationship with these extra dimensional beings, right? And that there's like a copy that has occurred with MLab, where they're performing the same or similar type of activities, but for nefarious reasons. Where what I would call, for lack of better words, unless you have something else, that sounds better, please share it. But the more benevolent contact, really is about our positive evolution. I believe in increasing, the human capacity's bandwidth, and to get back to what's integrous and, to what's more genuine. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Because to me, that's where that split really comes, where people get so fascinated with MLab and, the military, the government, and then, this victimization, and then this superhuman that is there to do something from a nefarious standpoint.
Yes. I spend maybe 25 to 35% of my time assisting those people who have been on the receiving end of what you call MLab, some people call my lab. We have to remember that the vast majority of MLabs are actually undertaken by humans. It is humans that are oppressing other humans. There are some alien inferences in that, but it's vastly the humans doing that. They're seeking to find people who are connecting, and you used the word, but you used it differently. They're 12 strands of DNA. So whenever a human is drawing down his or her own 12 strands of DNA, then the MyLab black helicopters are launched, and the person is taken out of their physical body. Samples are taken, because these people are operating as bellwether stations. They are the head of the game, and the elite are calculating how much time they have left, because when all humanity, or a sizable proportion of humanity, reaches the state that you're in, Susan, okay, in terms of your DNA, then there is no place for government, there is no place for war, everything will change. So what what MLab are doing is working out just how much time they've got left. Now, the important thing there is not necessarily the little grey aliens doing this. It is Black Ops, elite units undertaking that. So I always try and make a distinction with people that we mustn't just assume it's alien. Sometimes it is the humans. And they are using technology, which some of it's back engineered, some of it's found, and some of it's been invented. But that is separate from off-world intervention, which is heartily sick of the slavery that exists on this planet and wishes to redress the balance, but redress it in a way that humans have to work for it. In other words, I always say to people, you know, you are the 7th Cavalry. You are the 7th Cavalry. The problem with the way that human minds have been conditioned is that we look for a savior. You know, the people in Germany believed Adolf Hitler. The people in Italy believed Mussolini. We seem to be programmed to believe that someone will come and save us. Well, this is about human consciousness. It's about people working together. And that's why I formed a group called Connecting Consciousness, to try to raise the vibration and the idea amongst people. So I totally agree with you, Susan. You're absolutely right. That is the situation. And there is a good force and a bad force. I don't like that terminology, but when talking to the general public, that is the term I use because I know they understand that.
Wow. I'm jealous, and I'm wondering who Ireland has. Nobody's going to come and save Ireland. I don't know who we've got.
Actually, Ireland
You
is
are,
one
James.
I'm the guy.
Ireland is one of the most energetic places on the globe.
Funny you say
That's
that,
right.
Simon. I had this conversation about 2 weeks ago, and somebody was saying that like the amount of rain that we have, it's not very heavy rain. It's a lot. I mean, I have 265 days of rain a year, but the earth is just, and this land is, and especially in the north of Ireland where I'm at, is heavy crystallized. There's like granites and quartz all through the rocks, and it's got this misty rain all the time, energizing the air. And everybody talks about a different energy here and a different feel and a different ambience. But funny you say that. What is special about Earth or the people on Earth? Or is there something special, Simon? Are we in a unique position in galaxy, cosmos, universe, solar system? Is there something special about us? And I don't mean that from an anthropomorphic viewpoint going, we need a savior. I mean, are we people of interest to extraterrestrials for a specific reason?
Yes, it's the DNA.
Yeah.
It's the human DNA. When we talk about extraterrestrials, we're talking about alien creatures that have to travel from A to B in real time. So a very genuine guy called Charles Hall, who was a weather forecaster on Area 51 base, he talks about the tall greys. The tall greys are actually extraterrestrial, which means it takes them between 18 to 19 years to travel in real time from their place of origin to this planet. That is an extraterrestrial. But many, many, many aliens live so far away that they can't travel like that. They have to use a portal technology. So they are extra-dimensional beings. Now, when you are flying, this is where I suppose it gets more interesting. When you are flying an alien spacecraft, if you are reptilian, you can only travel at about twice the speed of light. That is why reptilians had to use portals to get anywhere. Human DNA can travel at 5, 6, possibly 7 times the speed of light. So if you can encode or understand human DNA, you can actually use it to fly spacecraft over and above the normal speed of your race if you're not humanoid. So that has always been the key to understanding why certain races wish to crack the human genome, and not just as we would understand it in this planet that haven't understood the real reason of the DNA. So that's one part of it. The second part is the planet. The aliens that I'm aware of refer to Earth as a water world. And that's very important. There are very few water worlds. And the other thing that's very important is the time that it takes planets to move around, because it means our lifespan on here is very short. And that's partly deliberate. It's been engineered so that our life is short. And that means we evolve very quickly. So if you are an alien creature who has a lifespan of 2,000 years, and you monitor the Earth for 1,000 of those years, look how life can evolve and change and adapt. We know from the Industrial Revolution how the moth was white, and then when the coal from all the chimneys made the grounds black, it was obviously seen and the birds picked it. So in a short period of time, its pigment changed and it became black, so that it was hidden. And then when the coal-fired power stations were removed and the environment cleared up, the moth then reverted back to white. Now that's unique. That's unique. It takes creatures on other planets thousands of years to evolve. But because of this particular environment that we have, all life, apart from reptilian and insect, evolves rapidly. And that is very fascinating to people who are watching from the outside.
And speaking about evolving rapidly, I know that a lot of the community, Simon, that are avid followers of you. When I say followers, I mean following your information, and people that are paying attention to what we're doing, here right now. There's been a lot of talk, hype, but also I think there are even like several months ago, people that were really feeling that come September of 2015. There's going to be this more significant movement, this more significant shakeup, and there's a lot of theory on what actually that might be, and actually what might happen. So I'm wondering if you had some thoughts on that, because there does seem to be this quickening, there does seem to be this acceleration in emotion, thought processes, what people are seeing in their day-to-day reality, and then just obviously what's shifting around in individuals' lives. So do you have some thoughts on that for what may be happening and going on?
Yes, 2 points. Alex Collier, in a recent interview, was absolutely right when he said that the changes coming in the end of September weren't going to be the be-all and end-all. It wasn't going to be some great big event. About 2.5 years ago, a blanket of energy was placed around the Earth of a reptilian nature, which activated reptilian DNA in anybody who had it. For 2.5 years, we've been in a stalemate position. We've not advanced as a human race as fast as we were predicted to do so. What is happening is that we are getting a blast of energy towards the back end of September, which will just nudge us forward again, because we're behind schedule in terms of development. So it is not anybody who says that it's this great big change coming. That's not the case. The great big change took place on the 21st of December 2012. This is an advancement to break the status quo, to break the stalemate, and to move humans forward. So that's where we're at with it.
So if individuals, let's just say this, if individuals who were more active with the, more the controlling anger, acting out what we know is really the older way that has gotten our planet, locked into this mess that we're in. If they've made choices that are not along the higher level aspect of consciousness, right, or for the betterment of self and others as equitable around them, what might happen with them? I mean, are they slowly going to be awakening, or with these energetic pulses that are coming in, is it going to actually produce some type of a smash, a crash, or something that's going to be a bit more disruptive?
As long as the hands of the clock are still 1 minute before midnight, everyone has the chance and the choice to decide on a different path. Once the hands reach midnight, that's it. Then there's no more choice over. I have never believed that 100% of humanity will walk through the other side of the door. That's just not going to happen. And it may be very unpopular, but I would be quite happy with 25 to 30%. And I know that's horror for most people, because they want much more than that. And I do too. But one has to understand that when 21st December 2012 came along, we only needed 2 to 3 million people on the planet to have reached a certain point, because that was the key that had been set. This will be the 7th time the human race has been to this position. 6 times before, it has been here and failed and gone all the way back again and started up. This is the 7th time. What happened was we had between 2 to 3 million people who were awake. That was enough to form a critical mass to kick it over so that we could start this process. You talked about, Susan, in the question or the point before this, about people experiencing things. The 4th dimension, or the 4th frequency, as it really should be called, but the 4th dimension contains a great deal of very heavy energy. We have a number of alien races which have not gone forward. They are weighing so heavily on the border, on the boundary between the 3rd and the 4th, that it is bulging now. It's bulging into our reality, which means that psychic people are getting more and more glimpses of another dimension because it's impeding or impinging onto our reality. And I talk about on a couple of occasions where I've seen it. I've going down the stairs of my own home, looking down at the tread of the stairs, and suddenly on one tread it appeared to have gone, and there would appear to be a 1,000-foot drop. Now I know that there's a real stair there, but I couldn't bring myself to put my foot, and I jumped it. I jumped over the stair to look back and find it was just as it was. This is what people will be spotting. They will be finding that for a split second, they will be viewing something else that they can't actually reach at the moment, but they can perceive. So we've got some fantastic and exciting changes ahead. It's not about fear. It's about experimenting, and it's about embracing and walking forward bravely.
Wow. I know Susan wants to talk about the Hadron Collider, and I know you do too, Simon, the August 15th stuff. We're going to come to that next. I guess, I know a lot of people focus on the Nazi era or Roswell or that 1945, 47, stuff like that, in that window of time. And nuclear disarmament, I mean, it is a big question. Yeah, let's get rid of the nukes, no problem with that. But people think that the aliens are here to get rid of our nukes because we're going to kill ourselves. I mean, maybe you can talk a little bit about that and give us your opinion on that, or what you see or what you know about a question of nuclear disarmament.
Nuclear weapons are not liked by anybody who use an electrogravitational form of propulsion, because a nuclear explosion affects the gravitational fields, and you can't effectively fly those type of craft through a region that's had nuclear explosions. The old adage of good cop, bad cop was played in the 1950s against the American government, where one alien race said, disarm and we will give you everything you need to assist you. And then another race turned up and said, well, we will give you extra technology which you can use to weaponize, and then this is what we want in return. Now, what's not widely understood, this was the same faction. So the same faction sent one group knowing that the human government would not accept it, and then came along the next day with what seemed like a much better alternative. So it was the same organization using different types of approach. I can fully understand why the human government did not disarm. They have and had a responsibility to protect the people of their own country and actually the world. And so they made a decision based on the information they had. Remember that in that time, very few people were spiritually evolved or advanced. So we can't actually blame them. That would be pointless to do that. The Roswell and the Nazi side, it is important that people do talk about this subject, because Roswell was absolutely pivotal for reasons that many people don't actually grasp. If you belong to a very high evolved form of space government, you are not allowed to give presents of advanced technology to an inferior race. And when I use the word inferior race, I don't mean spiritually inferior. The human race was technologically inferior. It's illegal. It is illegal to give that. So what Roswell was about was placing technology of advanced nature in the hands of humans in such a way as it went down as a crash. The technology comprised a number of things. One of the most dangerous was what we would call the Orion Cube or the Orion Box, which is a time travel device, and led the government to create things like the jump chair, jump room, allowed places like Montauk to project people into the future, to look at timelines and try and change timelines. This was all part of a plan from an organization outside of the Earth to try to steer the humans down a particular route. So Roswell is incredibly important. The Nazi era is incredibly important because Adolf Hitler received extraterrestrial assistance in 1933 with a space crash in the Black Forest, and up until 1941 was receiving a great deal of help, but he was buying oil from the Bush administration, the Bush family. And then in 1941 he decided that he no longer wished to buy oil from the Bushes, and he would attack towards Stalingrad and the huge oil refineries of Maykop and Grozny in the Soviet Union. And as soon as he did that, then the assistance was shipped away from him to America. And in 1941, there was an alien space crash in, I think, Missouri. The Americans received that, and the balance began to change. The two things to understand here is that when the Nazis took control of a downed spacecraft, they did not look at it as a weapon. Their interest was the flying of it. How do we make it fly? When the Americans got their downed spacecraft, they said, look at this reactor. How can we make a bomb out of it? And that's why the Americans were ahead of the Germans in terms of the nuclear weapon, but the Germans were ahead of the Americans in terms of the ability to fly a spacecraft.
So different intent.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why both Roswell and the Nazi periods, in their own way, are pivotal in understanding human history in the modern time.
Oh, wow. Wow. Let's talk about the back engineering for a moment. I mean, everybody wants to know about what the technology is. I mean, how difficult is it to back engineer? I mean, I know this from an engineer, but just from yourself, Simon. I mean, this is going to be like levels of advancement so above us. They're not going to just make a new spaceship and go, well, we've got all the technology. Show me all the blueprints. Okay, we got them all, great, and let's build our own. I mean, they're only going to get fragments of the technology, Simon. Is that correct?
Well, what they did was they gave old technology. They didn't give up-to-date technology, and they reneged on many deals. These are the greys we're talking about now. Spacecraft are created molecule by molecule. They're actually grown. That's the best way to describe it. The humans do not have that technology as such, but they have the technology to understand that humans are absolutely brilliant. They're fantastic. They can take something and do something with it. They don't understand that they are creating reality out of their thought, but that's what they do generally. My mother, my biological mother, her job when she worked for MI5 was to type out documents that had arrived from German scientists, ex-Nazi scientists, who were neither in America nor Russia, but had elected to stay in Berlin. And in order to not be prosecuted for their war crimes, they lost their status as German citizens and became not even citizens of Great Britain. They were managed by MI5 so that they couldn't be prosecuted under war crimes, but they could operate and work for the Secret Service. And then most of the Operation Paperclip scientists were based in America, but from time to time, these guys were overworked. And so it was a spill-off device, so that any technology that couldn't be worked on, that was sent to this group in Berlin, who would then come up. And it was always the same thing. We have found this. What does it do? Can you make it work? And what application can you make us? So these documents would come through to my mother. Sometimes they were only 4 or 5 pages thick, when very little was known about it. And sometimes as many as 15 to 20 pages. There were always drawings and diagrams with it. And it always ran in the same vein. ultimately, what can you do with it? And the reality was that they were only getting 10% out of its potential 100%. But nevertheless, that 10% was far in excess of anything else. So, for instance, I remember as a small boy, I would have been, about 7 or 8, reading what my mother had typed, and the shock and disbelief of scientists who were seeing a nuclear reactor which was literally only 3 feet in size. And they were, how can this thing produce so much power? So it was a great shock to humans to realize just how far behind they were technically. And this was the fear element, because it was an understanding that they really couldn't protect the people of the planet. They couldn't, because they didn't have the technology. And it was that frightened the military.
Where do you think the technology is today with these groups that obviously we don't really know about? But where do you think it genuinely is today? And I know that today is a marking time, and in some ways there is no time, so to speak, right? But generally speaking, where do you think it's gone to today?
Well, it is on the Earth, or it's on the Moon, or it's on Mars, or it's held out of phase somewhere between the 3rd and the 4th dimension, depending on who controls it and who they don't want others to get it. So we have, the Americans adopted the underground base, the deep underground military base, from the Nazis. That's one of the things that the Germans did for America, was show them how to hide things underground. And most of the secret technology is hidden underground, operated by an elite within an elite. These are the guys that do the day job, and then at night time they put the new patches on their uniforms and go and do what they do. That technology is held by corporations who control elements of the military. So please, the audience, don't be under any misconception here. It is the corporations that control the government. It is the corporations that actually control the military. And I was chatting to a retired officer from the American military who's now somewhere in Germany, who said that when he retired, he was asked to go on the reserve list. And he said, why would I want to work for a corporation? So even the military know what's going on, but they can't do anything about it. Yeah. The cracks began to appear in their attack because my story didn't change. And I know that they were looking for a change in the story, or a change in the line I was giving. But what really swung it was simply that in around 2013, the Ministry of Defence in Great Britain, alongside with the American military, invited me for a 3-hour tour of an American military base in Great Britain. It's called the Filing Dales 3-phased space radar array. This is the only 3-phased array in the world. Even in America proper, they only have a 2-phased array. And this is a radar that's the cat playing the piano. The 3-phased array actually looks around 3/4 of the globe. And this was very difficult for the established media, because here was Hello, James. Very kind of you to invite me. I'm very delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners.
From what I see of you, like I say, let's maybe talk about the MP thing first. I think that's probably instrumental in kind of, maybe guiding some of the early part of the show. You have been elected as a member of Parliament twice, I believe, but one of the times you actually had come out in the media as an experience. Is that correct, Simon? Is that the full facts?
Yes, I went public in, I think, about 2010, late 2010, early 2011. And then I was elected to office in 2012. So I'd gone public first and then was elected. It came up, I think, about 6 times on the doorstep. It wasn't a big issue. And it worked out of the 6 people who questioned me, 4 were in favour and 2 were against. It put me in a very strong position because those members of the elite who would have a problem couldn't turn around and say that I'd been elected and then I'd told people about my experiences. Because I did it the right way around. Sure. People had a choice to decide whether they wanted me or not. And I was elected. And so it, I think, was a bit of an enigma for certain people.
Yeah, you know, enigma is probably the best way to explain it because in one respect, you've had a strange situation with the media where you've actually gone from, well, let's say a media frenzy to some sort of an acceptance, somewhat, and partial acceptance anyway. I guess I think, you know, there's been a shift in the media. Maybe we can talk about that. I know you were on the Morning Today show, and that was interesting, Simon. And for the American viewers, by the way, it's a talk show in the UK on prime time television. But I mean, are we seeing a shift in the media? Not just maybe you can speak about your case in the media, Simon, and then talk about maybe the overall case of subject matter.
Fine. Initially, when I went public, the established media attempted to do what they always do, which is a hatchet job, which is to try to make you look as if you're mad or a Walter Mitty type character. And I think they kept that up for about a year. Somebody who was being given a guided tour around a top military base. And so the whole attitude of the established media changed after that.
Just to jump in there on that, what was the reason for the tour? What was the reason that they invited you?
Well, I live in the county of North Yorkshire, and this radar base is actually in the county that I live in. My daughter was approached. I have to be reasonably careful. My daughter was approached by somebody and was told that they knew what I was looking for, and my daughter was told that this particular individual could get me and my daughter into any secret base in Britain if I so chose. And my daughter spoke to me and I just said, look, I get this sort of thing all the time. It's a joke, ignore it. But however,